let's leave the politics for a moment and think about the personal, because you have said that you believe that those people with religious belief who impose their religious beliefs on their children are, in effect, responsible for a form of child abuse. You've called it very wicked.
I would like children, as far as possible, to be allowed to think for themselves. So, for example, to label a small child, a Catholic child, or a Protestant child, or a Muslim child, that I think is wicked, because the child is too young to know. And just to give you, I mean, I've used this illustration often enough before. If I said to you, that's a Marxist child, or that's a secular humanist child, or that's a Keynesian child, you would look at me as though I was mad. How can the child be a Keynesian child? And if I said to you, well, both its parents are Keynesians, you see what I mean? Religion has a free ride to label children with the belief system of its parents in a way that nothing else does. An economic system doesn't, political system doesn't, nothing else does.
But the fact is, and this comes back to this idea that you're unfairly picking on religion, the fact is that children are assumed to inherit many different values from their parents. It's not just religion,
no, that's right,
it's
they're not
modes of behavior,
labeled.
it's attitudes to sexuality, all sorts of things.
Yes. So suppose you take ornithology or something like that. It's perfectly reasonable to expect that, say, the child of Peter Scott will be an ornithologist. That's perfectly...
No, but let's not pick something which so obviously is a hobby. Let's pick something like attitudes to outsiders, to foreigners, people not within the tribe, the nation or the group.
So let's use the label xenophobe for somebody who is automatically hostile to outsiders. And would you say that a child of parents who you know to be xenophobic or racist, say, would you say that's a racist child? Of course you wouldn't. You'd say that's a child of racist parents.
Whether you term it a racist child or not, the odds are that that child will inherit some views.
It's an entirely different matter. That's an entirely different matter. That's an empirical matter which may or may not be true, but you're not giving the child a chance if you label it a racist child.
Well, you're not, but the labelling may not be something that goes deep into the consciousness of the child. If the child is still, as you were, I must say, you were raised as an Anglican, and you were confirmed, you went to church.
So what?
But the point is, your parents didn't stop you from thinking about other ways of looking at the world.
No, I mean, by the way, that has nothing to do with my parents.
You were labelled a Christian boy.
Nothing to do with my parents. That was school. I mean, I was sent to Anglican schools. But still, I mean...
So you were labelled an Anglican boy.
Sure I was.
But it didn't stop you imbibing lots of other knowledge about the world and seeing the world in your own particular way.
Well, of course not. I mean, as it happened, and it happens often enough, that lots of people manage to break free from whatever it is they're labelled as. But let me come back to the example you raised, which was the idea of a racist. Now, you made the point, which is a perfectly valid one, that a child of racist parents is actually quite likely to be a racist child. But you wouldn't dream of labelling a child a racist child. You'd think that was truly wicked, to say, this is a racist child because it's... And if I challenge you to say, how do you know...
Forgive me, and I do want to move on, but perhaps I'm misunderstanding something. You seem to be hung up on the labelling. I'm saying, leave aside the labelling, but the fact is, there are many things that children inherit from their parents, one of which is religion, but there are many other values, good and bad as well. Why pick on this idea that it's so evil for a child to inherit religious beliefs from his parents?
It is specifically the labelling that I'm talking about. It's just like the feminists raising our consciousness about sexist language, about saying, one man, one vote. And now the feminists picked on language, and you could say, well, it's trivial. I mean, it doesn't matter. Language doesn't matter. But it does matter, and the feminists demonstrated that. I am picking on language. I do think it's wicked specifically to label children. I have never said that it's wicked to bring children up in a particular belief. So, of course, children are going to learn from their parents. That's why I used the slightly frivolous example of ornithology. We could take racism as well. Of course, as a matter of fact, it's likely to be true. Actually, it's less true than many of us think. But as a matter of fact, it may well be true that children do inherit beliefs from their parents, but don't label them a racist child or a Catholic child or a Marxist child.
So far, we've talked about religions generally. We've mixed our references to Christianity, to Islam. But do you believe that, in essence, all religions, monotheistic religions with a belief in a supernatural God, are basically the same?
Well, they themselves, on good days, will claim that they're basically the same. They're all inherited from the mythical or possibly real man, patriarch Abraham. They call themselves the Abrahamic religions. It's perfectly clear that Christianity and Islam are derived from Judaism, but they're not the same in every respect. Of course they're not.
Well, let me develop the question then. Do you believe that it's possible to distinguish between moderate and extreme religion? And is that a meaningful way of looking at religion?
Yes, it's always meaningful to discriminate extreme from moderate.
Because your critics say that's precisely what you don't do enough of.
Well, perhaps I don't do enough of it. I mean, the point there is one that I think I agree with Sam Harris on, which is that moderation in religion, where religion, remember, is faith that's not based on evidence, moderation is a kind of cloak of respectability under which extremes can hide. And let me develop that a little bit.
So, in fact, it's more dangerous.
Not more, but
well,
I think it does...
If it's hiding the same essence underneath the cloak, it's actually more dangerous because
no, I don't think
what you see is not what you get.
I never said it's more dangerous, but I think it does provide a kind of smokescreen in which extremism can flourish. More than a smokescreen, actually, because if you think about the respect, let's come back to the point of respect. We're all supposed to respect faith, and so if somebody says, that's my faith, then you're not supposed to say, well, justify, because faith is not justifiable. You don't attempt to justify faith. So, now, if children have been brought up by moderate teachers to regard faith as a virtue, then a minority of them are going to use that faith and use the fact that faith is respectable to justify doing extreme things, which, of course, the moderates wouldn't dream of doing.
But I just wonder how some of your highly esteemed scientific colleagues, and I'll just name a few of them: Robert Winston, Francis Collins, director of the Human Genome Project, Owen Gingerich, Harvard astronomer, Martin Rees, British astronomer. All of these people profess religious belief. They believe in God.
Not Martin Rees, actually, but the point remains.
Well, I've read comments where he does appear to believe in religion, but...
Well, he describes himself as an unbelieving Anglican. He goes to church out of loyalty to the tribe.
I'm not sure that the Archbishop of Canterbury would recognise that concept, but
well, he might not.
Be that as it
that's
may,
the point.
The point is, I've just named you 3, arguably 4, senior scientists who do believe in God in one way or another.
Of course, I could name.
And yet
more.
you say that in the end, even moderate religion is a smokescreen for something potentially dangerous underneath.
Look,
they, I'm sure, would quarrel profoundly with that.
I'm not talking about every individual. I mean, you know, obviously, there are extremely nice, decent, respectable, intelligent, and totally non-violent Christians, Jews, Muslims, etc. Nobody's disputing that. And there are some awful individual atheists. Nobody's disputing that. What I am saying...
But you are saying they are all deluded, and in some ways you've described this idea that you can both believe in God and pursue scientific, evidentiary-based knowledge as treachery, that the God bit is treacherous.
Well, that's putting it strongly, and I do put it strongly sometimes. The point I was trying to make is that once you sell the pass about faith, once you agree that faith doesn't have to be justified, then the vast majority of people who have faith are never going to do anything bad. That's fine. But a few are going to do very violent things. And if you then try to challenge them, say, why do you do that? Well, how could you go and make yourself into a suicide bomb? How could you kill like that? They say, that's my faith, you mustn't question that. And they've been taught that. They've been taught to respect faith by moderate teachers. And that's the only point I'm making. Of course, I'm not saying that those people you mentioned who are thoroughly decent men, Francis Collins, Robert Winston, etc., delightful, intelligent, thoroughly decent men, of course they wouldn't dream of doing anything like that.